Welcome, welcome to part 6 of our most advanced Secrets of Healing workshop series called Electrification and Etherization. Today is the last part of our, almost 6 months long series. I hope that you guys all had the chance to look at the previous parts. The discussion went pretty deep, and we have now reached a point where I would like to create or close the arc of all these topics that we have started out with in part 1. Wonderful that you guys all came here today. The workshop is probably going to take 2.5 hours. I do want to have a discussion about these topics that we came up with in the beginning, and some of the questions that were raised in the past parts. I will repeat those sessions. I just want to real quick just sort of go into review here what it is that we have talked about in part 1. We have talked about some of the sort of current problems in the world and what they're indicative of or predictive of, like, we're headed as a whole collective. And I'd like to exchange your current insight. So this was like 6 months ago, so I would like to see where you're at with this today after you dove a little deeper into the spiritual context and the spiritual science of understanding, some of the greater consciousness. In part 2, we talked about the cycle of life and death and the evolution of soul. Just very briefly, we mentioned the afterlife. Then we dove a little deeper into the nature of the natural earthly material realms. Then we went into the nature of the supernatural realms, the spiritual realms, with learning about our spiritual senses and organs. And last part, we didn't really dive deep into the subnatural, the lower spiritual realms quite yet, but we did acknowledge that as above, so below, that there was a connection between, these higher realms, these the aspects of enlightenment and the spiritual hierarchies that are standing above us as humans, that they also mirror into the subnatural, the lower spiritual realms. This is something that I have called like one of these fundamental esoteric or spiritual concepts that we have to understand if we want to understand the evolution of consciousness and the evolution of our human soul. This is something we need to begin to look at. It's not just about us as individuals. We are part of a larger organism. You can say that the entire humanity is an organism. It's again part of the earth, which is also an organism, is part of the solar system, which is also an organism. So we look at all these different realms, spheres, or sheets of reality, and see that there always is another level. So this is really, really important, because we have a tendency to look at things in a very narrow-minded way. We look at our toe and we think we understand the human by knowing everything, the anatomy of a toe. All right, and this is obviously not very sophisticated. If we look at the nature of nature, if you will, then we can see that the more we dive into even the nature science, the science of the nature, okay, that there are realms that are just clearly beyond us, okay? And this doesn't mean that we're too dumb to understand it. It just means that there are realms that, we, with our current level of consciousness cannot grasp, which is totally okay. All right, because they still exist, they're there, okay, and we can also feel the effects of them on us, yeah, especially you guys here as energetically sensitive audience, okay, so I don't need to go into explaining what energies are with you because you all experience them. So there is this the subjective experience of these realms that we have, that we carry in us, and even sort of an imagery or an intuition or even an inspiration about why all this is there, and maybe not exactly how this is all connected, but that there's a reason why it's there. God's mysterious ways, if you will. You know, we accept that there are realms, that there are spheres that we cannot really control or master with the level of consciousness that we have today. This does not mean that we won't ever be able to do this, maybe not in this body, but the soul self that you are forming here due to your efforts as developing your spiritual identity, will experience that, will be able to master that at some point in time. Why am I saying that? Because it is part of our natural divine evolution. Okay, so this is basically the bigger plan. Yeah, we are just sort of a certain sort of a snapshot of development in a much larger cycle of developments, if you will. If you, I often compare us with, sort of a spiritual infant or a toddler. If you will, like, you look at a toddler and what you see there is clearly, a toddler, can barely walk, barely talk, doesn't really have a lot of social skills, doesn't really, isn't really able to self-reflect and so forth. But yet it is a full human, it's a human in development. And last time in part 5, we basically ended with, the thought process of accepting that we are more or less gods in training. Yeah, we are souls, young souls, that are having a human experience that is instrumental in our consciousness development, but is still relatively low in the hierarchy of the totality of spiritual hierarchies or spheres that we have out there, which, by the way, are not made up. Those are known to us since Vedic times. Okay, this is something that many of us forget, that spiritual sciences are 6,000, 8,000 years old. In nature science, only 300, 250 years old. So there is a tremendous body of research, okay, that shows, some of these things like spiritual hierarchies. Even the Bible mentions the 9 choirs of angels, okay, that are standing above us. So as a human, we are standing, here at the lowest level of soul identity development, yeah, spiritual soul, spiritual ID development. However, in the larger developmental or evolutionary chain of things, if you include the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the mineral kingdom, we are farther developed than the rocks, than the plants, than the animals. All right. And so we got to understand that this whole idea of, as above, so below, that and spiritual hierarchies goes both ways. Okay, so what we experience here in this material world, just like how you know this maybe from visibility of light, okay, it's a small fraction of what we here in this material world, in this incarnation right now, what we can, perceive with our 5 senses, because our 5 senses are basically just very, very fundamental instruments. our spiritual senses, our spiritual organs are much higher developed. However, in order for us to actually master them, we need to train them. It's kind of like with speech, okay? And speech is one of those higher senses that we all have. But if we, like, say, were abandoned in the woods and grow up among wolves, we don't develop speech. And that's not because we can't, it's because we haven't trained, we haven't refined it. And the same applies to our spiritual organs and the skills and the abilities that the higher faculties that come with that. So, all of you guys here, listening to this, ingesting this, consuming this kind of impulse, this kind of knowledge, if you will, you have an impulse in you, that kind of resonates with that, and you probably already have, some of your spiritual senses either discovered, or you're working with them, or you're actively training them, and refining them. Okay, so I don't really need to go all the way back to that and try to convince you that you have higher faculties in you. Yeah, we all have them in us. And our job here in this material world is basically to discover them, to purify them, to refine them, to ennoble them, to bring them into their higher expression. That's really, in a nutshell, sort of what we are doing here. And when we go deeper into the cosmological and spiritual um, concepts of all of this, and I mentioned a few fundamental spiritual concepts that we need to learn to master in order to answer those questions, in order to have those kind of discussions, such as, do we have to be afraid of the zombie apocalypse, or is there, life on other planets, or can we, like, use machines in order to augment our human faculties, etc. You cannot really have that kind of discussion unless you understand certain the spiritual concepts, such as life and death, okay, the circle of life, the spiritual hierarchies. You have to understand what darkness is, and you have to learn to discern it. You have to understand what the subnatural is. You have to learn to discern it. And you have to know the differences between exo and esoteric, yeah? The inner and the outer experience, the inner and the outer knowledge. And those are all things that you've learned here, or that you're in the process of learning. So there is, no sort of natural divine evolution without understand. Well, there is an evolution no matter whether you understand it or not, but there is no understanding of it, and ability to project that into the future if you don't know, what sort of the bigger context, what the cosmological aspects and the spiritual hierarchies and these adversarial forces are. So this is what we did here. Yeah, we explored um, those sort of broader perspectives in order for us to better understand current events, to better understand our life, to better, to be able to better implement, our spiritual knowledge, into our practical life. So last time this question arose, how does this knowledge help me? Well, it can help you greatly if you understand what the purpose of your experience is, where this is going to go, what, what is useful, what is not, what are things that support you, and what are things that work against you. That's extremely practical. So, so my plea here really is that without spirituality, we can't really understand these bigger things, and especially when it comes to our future. So right now, here in 2024, we're at this sort of pivotal point where there's a lot of new technologies emerging, and where we have to develop a critical point of view, because there's a lot of fears around them, and rightly so, but most people don't even know why. So there's a very, very strong sort of fear, mind control, inculcation right now that in order to overcome that, in order to see through that, you won't be able to do that without spiritual understanding of it. Yeah, without understanding the forces that are at work and what their agenda is. So I want to go as far as saying that without spiritual understanding, we won't be able to face that fear. Yeah, we'll go nuts in the process. So spiritual awakening is really sort of the sign of the times. Is what we need in order to master life, the life that is coming. Okay, that's how far I want to go with this. Yeah, and say without spiritual understanding, you cannot make sense of what is going on in the world, and then therefore, it's extremely practical. Yeah? Especially if you put in some aspects that have to do with like the energetic quality and the alignment, yeah, what we are aligning ourselves to when we love, when we hate, when we fear, etc. So the understanding of different energetic qualities and how they affect us, first spiritually, but then ultimately also in the material, is instrumental, I want to say. Yeah. And that's why I keep repeating like a broken record that we need to learn to discern. We need to learn to discern truth. And how can we discern truth? We got to know truth to discern truth. How can we discern, like what is true and what isn't? We got to know ourselves. Okay, what do we need in order to discern truth? We need freedom. Why do we need freedom? Because if we are sort of in some sort of mind control, I'm just saying this because I'm lazy, so it's an easy word to express that we are like under the influence of some kind of external outer agenda. Yeah, if we are under the effects of mind control, we're not free. And if we cannot think freely, how can we know anything? How can we even begin to use our mind for, discerning truth? We can't. And the same applies to our heart. Now, if we are swamped, if we are overloaded with fears, with desires, with addictions, yeah, how can we discern love? How can we know what is true love and what isn't? We can't. Okay, so you see there's a sort of a trinity here of truth, freedom, and love. They belong together and form, yeah, basically grace, if you will. They're the foundation of all that gives life purpose. Yeah? That gives life purpose. That gives us a goal. That gives us, something to strive for. Why am I calling it grace, or why am I calling it truth, love, and freedom? Because I understand the energetic pillars, the energetic forces, or the spiritual forces. Okay, at this level of discussion, I'm using energetic and spiritual interchangeably. Okay, yeah, the spiritual forces that are at work. And they are fundamentally consisting of truth, the spirit of truth, the spirit of freedom, and the spirit of love. Yeah, forming, the essence of basically the might, or the, like a little bigger than force, that brought everything into existence. Okay, so that's what we're here for, what we're here to learn. And that's why we need to, learn these spiritual concepts, because we can't understand any of this if we don't have a proper grasp on, what is the self. What's the difference between a false self and a true self? What's the difference between my material self and my spiritual self? You don't have to go as far as like learning the differences between the etheric and the astral. Very, very few people in this world actually can. Okay. But learning about, the cosmological aspects. Last time I said, you can, find a lot of wisdom in astrology. Astrology is one of the oldest sciences that we have. Yeah. Um, you can find a lot of wisdom, obviously, in all the spiritual teachings from all the different religious or spiritual sort of groups or developments in the history of mankind. And you will always find, basically similar things. You'll find, the as above, so below. So you find the underworld and the heavens, or heavens and hell. Okay, and then in the middle, you find the material, the earth, the human. Okay, so this is an image that we can carry that actually works pretty well. But you guys are now at a point where you need to investigate this a little bit further. Well, what is hell? What is heaven? What is there actually? We think like it, we think about these things in an unreflected way, like a child, it's like, oh, heaven is up there and hell is down there, but it's much more complex than that, guys. Yeah, and it's nothing that needs to worry us or scare us. It's just something that comes with the territory. So as soon as you start asking deeper spiritual questions, you need to go back to the learning pad, and start ingest a little bit more of this spiritual knowledge that has been compiled, over thousands of years. Okay, and then you begin to see things a little differently. Okay, so last time we looked at the mechanics of etherization, and it was probably sort of more than you could digest. Okay, which is totally fine. The same happened with the mechanics of electrification that I talked about in part 1 and 2. All right. But these are words that you need to be familiar with to understand the difference between above and below. Yeah. To understand or to be able to discern, what kind of choices, what kind of alignments, what kind of thoughts, sentiments, and feelings lead you where. Yeah. What kind of force, what kind of spirit in you do they feed? Yeah, what am I? What is the direction in which I'm sending, my essence? Okay, when I make choices based on fear or based on doubt or based on hatred. Okay, and what kind of path am I sending my soul on when I am making conscious choices that are based on forgiveness, that are based on love, that are based on compassion? We need to know the difference, and we need to know the implications. We are no longer babies, that are nourished through an umbilical cord. We have the ability to form our own spiritual ID now, and that means that we have to, well, basically act self-responsibly. We have to like start working it. We have to work for it. Okay, we're not just going to get, prophetic dreams and they're going to tell us what to do. That's not how this goes in the 21st century. Now, this is an older developmental stage where people were much more linked into the astral worlds, okay, but therefore didn't really have the free choice as we do today. Today we have the free choice. Today we can, gather this kind of information. We can, work on our consciousness. We already have like a full understanding of how our mind works and how emotions work, how our body works. 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years ago, they didn't have that yet. But today we do. Yeah. So this isn't about us getting, visions and and then all we got to do is follow this vision. This is one of these false expectations that we have when we sort of set out to become spiritually enlightened. Think about it, what it actually is that you're asking for. Then you're asking for somebody or something, yeah, something external, yeah, be it higher spiritual or not, to tell you what to do. And wanting to have a spiritual identity, wanting to have an individuated soul self, guys, and wanting somebody else to tell you what I do, this doesn't go together. Does this make sense? It does not go together. We're gonna have to get this straight in us. Yeah, we either gonna step up and say, okay, all right, I want this. I want my spiritual independence. I want this. I want my own soul self to develop. Yeah. The only thing that we may not quite know yet is why and where this is going to lead. So this is also part of understanding the bigger picture. It's the consequences of stepping into this higher development. Like what happens? What kind of um, sort of what's the aftermath of me choosing that? And obviously, when I'm talking about the aftermath, I'm not talking about what's going to happen to you tomorrow, or how well you're going to be able to manifest money or riches or relationships in this life. I'm talking about the afterlife. I'm talking about the much bigger existence that you have, yeah, the eternal and infinite, that aspect of you. Okay, not the maybe 80 earth years, okay, that you live in this physical incarnation. I'm talking about the bigger picture. What consequences does it have when I choose to strive for truth, freedom, and love, as opposed to succumbing to fear, doubt, and hatred, and all the stuff that comes with this? Obviously, we talked about this in the first part of this workshop series. So this is what I call alignment. Okay, yeah, striving for, has to do with, what you make your priorities, what the values are that you live by. Okay, and it is needless to say that if you, strive for love and freedom and truth, you incorporate, all these what we call higher vibratory qualities, such as forgiveness, understanding, compassion, empathy, healing, and so forth. Yeah, so all these qualities that from Hawkins's map of consciousness, as an example. We use this almost in every workshop. This is basically a roadmap for you. Okay, so everything that you see above truth, yeah, here, any of these qualities that you see here, as truth basically being the division line, that come in and are represented through the embodiment of your true self. Okay, they lead you to the higher versions of yourself, the purification, the ennobling, the refinement, and the natural evolution of your soul. And anything below truth, okay, pull you back, get you stuck, or if it gets really low, actually throw you, or can throw you out of your natural evolution cycle. You've heard me say sometimes that everybody's going to get there. There's a long way and a slow way, and that is still true. But there are alignments, there are things that humans can choose. Yeah, certain values, certain lives, certain activities, certain sentiments, and so forth that humans can choose that align them to these lower realms, these subnatural realms, and therefore throw them out of their natural evolutionary track, if you will. And this is where we landed in part 5. And Jared asked, I don't know, Jared, are you here? If you remember what you asked, I don't know exactly how you worded it. I'm paraphrasing, but you basically asked if there's a way back at all, or if this sort of indicates some kind of soulless human. Okay, and then I joked about it and said, yeah, that's a question we're gonna answer next workshop. Do we need to be afraid of a zombie apocalypse? Okay, so what happens, yeah, when a human soul decides, consciously or unconsciously, so this can happen unconsciously. This was a question that we also had a while ago. When a soul chooses, and the soul being you, okay, not some outer force or whatever, to leave this natural divine evolution. How can this happen? And where does this lead? And what happens? Is there a way back? That's basically sort of the framework for today's discussion. Yeah, like what happens if you fall off the wagon? And in the Bible and in the Quran and in the Torah, um, and even in the Vedic teachings and the Buddhic teachings, to a certain degree, we have the mention of like something like fallen angels or fallen gods or fallen something. And so that's basically what that means. It means that there are beings or entities, yeah, of any kind of hierarchical level, okay, that can fall off the wagon. They can fall off the natural divine evolution. And when that happens, and this is probably the best how you can imagine this, is it's like they invert their evolutionary cycle inverts, and then we speak of a devolution. Okay, so inversions of natural evolution, yeah, one a way to describe this is a devolution. So they basically regress. But how can this look like? For this, we need to, again, understand a little bit more about the different realms and spheres, that we're operating in. And I was going to give a little review here about, these different spheres. I've mentioned the spiritual hierarchies many, many times, so I don't really want to go deeper into that. There's a 13-part video series on my YouTube channel, 12 Sacred Self, 12 Days of Sacred Self, where I go a little deeper into this if you need this, in a bit more systematic or methodical kind of way. So I want to start this discussion here with asking you how you have pictured this whole process of sort of heaven and hell. How have you sort of in your own mind, and mind you, most of us have not yet thought about this, so don't feel bad if you feel judged because I said it's not very sophisticated to think of it just in this way. Yeah? So don't misunderstand me. I'm reflecting the current state of consciousness that humanity has. So I'm reporting about this. So we're here to overcome this. We're here to go farther. But up until now, how do you understand, sort of the higher realms and the lower realms? Maybe you have had a certain religion or a certain church that you grew up in, and that gave you a framework for, like, the higher and the lower worlds. give us an example, like, of how you see it. We all have different experience levels, inner and other experiences, and there's no judgment in anything. Yeah, we all come from different backgrounds, we all come from different countries and so forth. Let's just put this together, where we're at. Where are we at with that kind of discussion? Heaven and hell.
I'm not trying to not respond, but I don't really have a vision of heaven or hell. I don't I don't believe in probably either. I certainly don't believe in
Hmm.
hell.
Okay. So you believe in heaven somewhat? Okay, so that's how does that? I mean, when I say vision, I don't mean like a prophetic vision or anything. Like just an image in your head or whatever. So heaven is something. Is that just sort of generic for where you go when you die? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, for me it's sort of a place of all knowing, no, like no body, all heart, all um just everything's calm.
Okay.
No ego, I guess, is maybe what heaven is.
No ego. Did you say no ego? Because
Yeah,
then you blipped out there for a sec. Okay. Because then it was like all ego. No, it's got to be no ego. What you said. Okay. So like an idealized kind of world without conflict, I suppose. Without.
yeah, just that I then will know and understand everything.
Mhm.
And I believe that I've been there before when I came to do this stint on Earth. I lose that knowing, and then I'll come back to the knowing.
Okay. Hmm. Thank you, Minna, for sharing.
Jona, this is
Yeah.
Roger.
Yeah. Hey, Roger.
Hi. I think for me, hell, it can't be any worse than when I was in my addictions and loaded with fear. I'm not afraid of anything worse than that. And since that's all changed, since working with you and stuff, I can't imagine anything better than what I've experienced already in life as a heaven. I don't think there's any place for me to go. It's all the experience, the inner experience, just like I have right now, depending on my frame of mind and perspective and um, anything like that. So,
So basically, like, basically, what I hear you say is that you already you refer to the material world, to the material experience, and that you also understand that it depends on what you align yourself to, but you're not seeing heaven and hell as some kind of like afterlife type of things. I mean, maybe they exist, but you're not afraid of them, or you're not striving for either of them because you're convinced that what you've experienced here is already both. You've experienced both.
yes, it's all energetic, the pain and the bliss or whatever. I mean,
Hmm.
uh, I lived in such a constricted, painful world before, and now I can manage most times. I mean, it fluctuates, but my life is uh, quite stable. I can manage surprises and difficulties with an even flow and feel good about them when I get through them. Typically, um, very few painful times, but it's all energy. So yeah,
Hmm.
I think I've experienced them in that way here already, and
So you
do
don't think it's
continue
it's
to.
severely different. That's what I'm saying. Like the way, like
No,
you have a feel for it already. So you're not, and you know that both exist. You acknowledge both.
Yes. I've seen my own like hell worlds, and I knew
Hmm.
exactly what it was within me and how I got to them, and it was all my mind, pretty much.
Hmm.
Fears and judgments and victimhood and um, quite nasty stuff and very painful, much of it. So I can't imagine. I mean, there's probably torture techniques that would hurt more,
Physically,
obviously.
yeah,
Somewhere,
or
yeah,
emotionally, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I. That's about
What
it.
what
I've
I hear
definitely
you
been
say,
in both.
sorry,
Go ahead.
what I hear you say is that you acknowledge that there's an energetic reality to every sort of equivalent emotion or deed or sentiment here in the physical. Yeah, so I
Yes.
heard that in between that you said you've seen your own hell worlds, you've seen these things, seen as in like probably explored spiritually, energetically. So you acknowledge that both these realities kind of mirror one another, or that they exist simultaneously. That's what I'm hearing. Is that what you
Yes.
mean?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it brings us back to the
Mm-hmm.
choices we have in all moments, right? And my just outlook, pretty
Mm-hmm.
much, my beliefs.
Yeah, that makes a huge big difference when you acknowledge that both realities, like sort of a hellish and a heavenly reality, exist simultaneously, and that you here in the now, more or less choose where you go with it, at any moment in life,
Right.
you know. What does that do? You mentioned a little bit about how it changed your life, how this view changed your life. You said you've experienced both, and you now see that you now feel like that you can navigate through life's curveballs, um how did you say, much more with much more fluidity, with more ease. I'm hearing, right, with more
Yes.
ease.
Flow.
Mm-hmm.
Flow. I used to be so controlled by fear. It was like I was wrapped in barbed wire. All my actions um, were based on fears.
Mm-hmm.
Just about everything I did,
Mm-hmm.
24 hours a day, was based on fears. So I didn't experience life. I couldn't experience life at all because it kept me so locked down, and I couldn't experience a lot of the feelings that you do when you're free, like happiness and joy and gratitude. Those are all blocked by the fears. So I spent, over 20 years of my life that way, and it was totally miserable. I wanted to die, and now the basically probably one of the most important things that happened was I overcome the fear
Yeah, that's
by going through a lot of those things and trust and faith and my current beliefs. So now I can experience almost anything in life with very little fear. I just walk right into it and I go through the experience. I can interact with people and feel what's going on, especially what's going on in me, without the fear. So this is like uh, the greatest freedom I've ever known in my life. So there's nothing to me that like heavenly that could exceed that or would need to exceed that by much um, to improve. Maybe there's like barriers there that stop the negative thoughts from coming in. So you don't have to focus so much on that.
Well,
You know
maybe
what I
there is
mean?
a
Making
mechanism.
yourself.
Maybe I mentioned this before, that there is a mechanism that once you are more conscious, once you are more free, and once you can discern truth, and once you know love, that you develop certain levels of immunity, to
Yes, I'm
dark
aware of those
forces.
levels of
Hmm.
immunity, but I mean, maybe there's a place that gets even more powerful.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
know, or
so you're not
those things
excluding that.
matter in life. No,
You're
I'm
not
not.
excluding that.
But I don't. It's not something I need and live focused on, like
So
doing certain things just so I get to heaven. I don't live like that.
relative to where you used to live, what you would call hellish places, you are already experiencing sort of heavenly feelings. okay, relative to where you lived before, or how you
Yes.
lived before. Now, and you just made a case for what I said earlier about freedom. We have to have the freedom. If we're dominated by fear, if we're dominated by anger, if we're dominated by doubt, okay, then we cannot really make any free choices. We're not capable of making a free choice. Even if it was right in front of us, even if heaven was right in front of us and there was a sign and it says to heaven, we wouldn't be able to see it.
You
Okay.
cannot know.
But I want to ask you something else because I find that quite interesting how you said that. So you said that you acknowledge, the hellish experience and the heavenly experience, and now regardless of the simultaneousness of it, but you have no problems with admitting to yourself that there is something like a pit, like a hell, or a
Yeah,
really
I,
dark place. Yeah, be it inside of you or outside of you, that's a different discussion. But
yes,
you do acknowledge that there is something like that, and yet you talk about freedom and you talk about no fear, and you even I think you used the word trusting. Okay, so that's interesting to me, Roger, because for a lot of people, the reason why they don't really want to acknowledge that there is something like hell or like a pit or something like that is because they're afraid of it. Okay, so there's a natural aversion that we all have, yeah, to avoid, kind of fear thoughts. Okay, so in your words, maybe, how did you get this together? When did this change in you? You said something about when you were in these sort of hellish places, you couldn't really feel these other feelings, like the high, what we call the higher vibratory qualities. So it
yeah,
blocks
well,
it.
yeah, you can't feel anything because the fear overrides it all.
So when you're
um,
in hell, do you know that you're in hell?
I knew I was extremely miserable. Like I say, I wanted to die. The first round of it had to do with my drinking and using,
Hmm.
um, and that was brief and um, very intense for me. I started when I was about 15, and I ended up in 30-day rehab when I was 22. And uh, I wanted to die at the end. There was no question. I made another choice for, I had my reasons to make another choice to live. But so I got uh, so tired of it, I just couldn't do it anymore. So I hit a bottom, and then I went into recovery for many years, very active. I did a lot of things to go through a lot of my fears, and then I relocated, took on a new career, and I started just working a lot and isolating. And I went back into all that stuff again, not the drinking or using. I've been straight since I initially stopped. But I went back into all of those things again and became extremely miserable again and hit another bottom basically and started looking for change. And that's when I started uh, spiritual pursuit again. And it's probably about the time I uh, came to you through a couple other websites. And when I started doing the work, that's when things really started changing for me. And that's where, when I was in the recovery program, I couldn't get beyond it all. I don't know if it was, I was extremely self centered and so full of fear that a lot of it didn't seem to work for me. So I couldn't let go of everything
At the time.
until at the
At the time.
time,
Hmm.
until I think maybe I had to experience it again without the alcohol and drug, the darkness.
Hmm.
That went on probably for 10 years until I just knew I had to change. Again, I was at a point where I wasn't living life at all. The fears and everything were blocking me from all the feelings and, relationship and all of that kind of thing. So you can only live, in my case, I can only live for so long without the human, um, I guess spiritual needs too, but the human interaction and stuff is so critical for us. Today, I hid most of my life. If I saw a boat coming down a river a mile up above us, I'd pull my boat to shore and go out in the woods until they went by, just so I wouldn't have to face people, things like this, and I'd avoid most socializing. And that kind of reputation and beliefs still carry with me. But I just recently went to a Fourth of July celebration, two social things I did, and it's like I had the best time ever. And this is where life exists,
Hmm.
where it occurs, where it goes on, and that's the freedom now. But anyway, when I began working with you, is what started unwinding everything. I had a lot of large breakthroughs and insights and experiences that just changed so much for me.
I'm still pondering about whether one knows that one is in hell when one is in that low place.
I
Um,
didn't, I didn't, I wouldn't call it a hell at that time. Um, but when I look at it now, that's pretty much what I think it is.
I
It
agree. I
can't get
agree
much
with you
worse.
on that one. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you on that one. And many of you know this. I've been there too. Also, very early in my life, very similar to
You
Roger,
know,
without the substance. But the point is, when I think back to my times when I was literally in hell, okay, yeah, seen from today's perspective, I didn't know that I was in hell. The
you
only
know,
thing I knew was I was very, very far away from heaven. Whatever my
yeah,
understanding of heaven was at the time, it was unobtainable for me. It was basically shut down, closed, not an option. So I might as well end my life because, what's the point? That's kind of like how that felt to me.
yeah. And we're so closed-minded and so
Yeah,
fixated on everything that we're doing is exactly right. Everything else in the world is wrong.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We're not open to, I don't even think thinking in that way because we think we're correct and in control. So that I can see that looking back now. It's like there's nothing wrong with me. It's everything else. You know what I mean?
Well, or the variation that I had was as everything is wrong with me.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
so
I
bad,
had that at times
that
too.
I don't
Yeah,
belong here. It's
I
like,
felt that. Yeah, as soon as I
mhm.
can, my furthest memories back, I didn't feel like I belong here either. I looked up, remember looking up at the sky one night. I was outside, and it's like, who made this stupid big mistake and stuck me here? And I was like, really looking for an answer. I figured somebody screwed up big time. But
Yeah, so this is a
anyway,
cool discussion. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Roger.
you're welcome.
Your take on heaven and hell and the inner experience of that, and whether or not they both exist, whether they exist outside of us, like as in like only in the afterlife, or whether we can experience them actually during our lifetime here. A very, very cool discussion topics, and very worthwhile diving into, guys, like in general, like as your own contemplation or as discussion topic with others. Yeah, so
Thanks, Jona.
this whole discussion about heaven and hell, guys, and obviously what we associate with it. Okay, if you ever look for topics, or things to discuss with other people of any like true relevance. Okay, obviously, you can discuss fancy esoteric concepts with people, but that kind of triggers lots of spiritual specialness. It really comes down to those kind of discussions, like between humans, what we experience sort of as heavenly or hellish. And that is then what triggers, and Roger, you just gave us a very, very beautiful sort of insight into that it triggers the bigger questions. Yeah, did somebody, did God made a mistake? you know, or what's wrong with the world? Yeah, or what's wrong with me? Or, you know, all these kind of questions, guys, are spiritual questions. Yeah, they are not necessarily things that we need to avoid. Go ahead, Janet. I see your hand.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
We just had a big storm come through. The Yeah, you mentioning it this way, what stands out to me the most, and it is such a great question because initially it's heaven and hell are two words, and here we're using just the English words for these things, and they're quite just polar opposites. To me, they're kind of like, I just think, oh, I was first programmed with uh, hell had the man standing there with the pitchfork, and
Hmm.
then heaven, there I am on a cloud with wings, and then you just kind of live life, and then every single day, I didn't at least contemplate heaven and hell. Um, Although I definitely experienced all sorts of levels of existence. A lot of it was externally invoked, through family and things like that. I don't necessarily think I was born. I don't. I don't. I wasn't born sad and depressed and with problems. I was lively and going through a bunch of stuff. And then yeah. So that to me, I mean, I won't go into my things. And when it was slower and when it got really bad and what it felt like. And if I thought about it, it was hell or not. But I knew it wasn't the right place to be. And I knew I lived my
Hmm.
life. I went into dark things and kept trying to dig myself out and just knew it wasn't right. But never identified, oh, there's the devil standing there or there's the angel
No, because
standing
those
there.
pictures don't work. They're too
No.
childish in a
And there's
way,
so much
right?
judgment that comes along
Yeah,
with the whole thing too. It's all based on judgment. So
yeah.
it's
Like with
just,
you go
in
into
the
hell.
end, it's just we're just born and we're a spirit and we're experiencing either external or internal faster or slower vibrations. And yeah, so it's the programming part of it. I think that kind of it's kind of like the, I don't know. We're starting with it as the beginning of the subject here, which is obviously what's happening. It's not a judgment of that, where it's actually kind of like the end result of a bunch of other stuff like heaven and hell. Is just like they don't really mean anything. They've lost their meaning as just a programming two words.
In that, I would agree. In that sort of childish or childlike imagination. Okay, yeah. So in that, they've lost uh, their meaning for us. Okay, but mostly because we've also lost, the spiritual meaning of those places. Okay, so as a civilization, as a humanity. Okay, so if you go back just a few hundred years and you read Dante's Inferno, for example, that was a very vivid representation of the time, in the 17th century, how people regarded those different levels of hell. Okay, there wasn't just like the guy with the pitchfork, but it was like, actually, I did show a picture of that in the
Oh
first.
yeah, of course.
There was a very, very differentiated here. Like these are
Yeah,
like
and it's showing
paintings.
up in all the old
Hmm.
artwork. Masters having it
Hmm.
as well. Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
And here you can see, this like sort of being sort of a depiction of how to see those different levels of the underworld. You see certain attributes here assigned to them. Like greed um, and anger and violence and treachery and lies and so forth. So this is very similar to the map of consciousness that we're looking at. It's just different words, but they really capture sort of the energetic quality of these places. Okay, so in nowadays world with the profaning, things such these spiritual hierarchies, yeah, like what's above us and what's below us, with, the wings on a cloud and the guy with the pitchfork, we've also lost connection with, something that is really something that we can actually feel if we allow ourselves to go there. Okay, so we can have an inner experience of these places, as Roger just showed us. Yeah, so Roger described, some of these places here, as part of his human experience. Yeah, whether this is now just referring to the afterlife, or whether we can experience hell or heaven in our lifetime, that's a different discussion. But this idea that there are, the different energetic qualities or resonances, I think you called it, that exist, like a scale on, like a tonal scale, on a piano, or like a range of light frequencies, or a range of colors. Okay, that changes our perspective into a more sophisticated and actually more accurate, picture of how this actually works. And when we do that one step where we recognize, okay, that there is a scale, there's a range, okay, within which we can operate, that's then a lot easier for us, no more judgment. That's then a lot easier for us to see our choice element here. Yeah, to see that, whenever I make a choice based on greed, or whenever I lie, or whenever I'm disloyal, whenever I delude other people, whenever, I'm special and try to win, and whenever, I'm like uh, lustful, make decisions based on that, I'm actually sort of tethering myself to these kind of levels of being. All right. And the same in a positive sense, that whenever I act out of compassion, whenever I, try to open my mind to be non-judgmental, when I go into forgiveness, when I align myself to lovingness or even unconditionality, all right, then I'm actually tethering myself to these heavenly realms. Yeah, and this is something that really needs to kick in for us as spiritually open people. All right, that with this whole concept of choice, yeah, which is linked to the concepts of spiritual identity, the I, yeah, the conscious I, the conscious and individuated soul self. We are actually growing into our ability to make a conscious choice. And that conscious choice does not just determine the energetic reality and some kind of uh, fiction, afterlife fiction, but it actually determines our experience here in our life, during our lifetime. Yeah, so whether or not this is mirrored in the afterlife, that's a question that we can maybe answer a little bit later today. But to see, heaven and hell more sort of as part of the same scale, all right, um, depending on what we are aligning ourselves to with gradients, right? Yeah, so there's a there's a higher hell and a lower hell, there's a higher spiritual and there's the lower spiritual, okay? So once you start opening yourself up to seeing reality in this way, that we can also see the natural world. We can see in the natural world, at least that state of the art science nowadays, that everything is a matter of resonance and frequency, okay? And that, depending on, which sort of step here on that scale, looking at, and depending on the perspective that you have, that is what you're seeing. That is the range that you're seeing, and it's downward compatible, which means that the higher you go, the more you can see. You can see downward as well. The lower you go, the less you can see, because you can't see what's above you. You can only see what's below you. Okay, so we can conclude just out of shifting our perspective that something like the map of consciousness, where do I have it here, is actually a very accurate uh, tool for us, to orient ourselves toward either, if you will, the higher spiritual realms, the supernatural realms, yeah, whereby truth be the actual material, natural realm, like anything that we can, verify through our five senses. Okay, and these ranges below truth, as the subnatural, sort of the underworld kind of forces. And this is now, then the part where people get scared. But if you actually allow yourself to see all this like a range, okay, and you have the choice in what sort of frequency, if you will, you want to play the instrument or you want to play the song, okay, now comes the part that most people don't want to acknowledge, and that is that there is beings, that live in these places. Yeah, there is, all kinds of yeah, if you will, like not maybe conscious souls, not souls per se, but beings that can either be of higher spiritual hierarchy, so that would be the angels, the archangels, the archai, the exousiai, the thrones, and so forth, the seraphim, and so forth, or it can be lower, yeah, in hierarchy. So it could be the elementals, the ghosts, the phantoms, um, the demons, the ghouls, and so forth. Yeah, so and the fallen angels. Okay, so this part, where we actually begin to see these frequencies also as spiritual realities. This is the connection that we need to do nowadays again. Okay, we lost that connection. This is a very natural thing for people. Just 300-400 years ago, thousands of years ago, it's very natural for them to make that connection. Okay, so if we, you know, just see it as frequency or vibration, okay, which so many of us in the New Age propagates that do, okay, we lose the connection to what it actually means. Okay, so if I am tethering myself, yeah, to the level of fear, like Roger described to us, I'm literally feeding the spirits of fear. Okay, I'm giving up my power to choose. I'm giving them my power to choose, and therefore strengthen them, which weakens me. Let me repeat that. So when we tether ourselves, when we align ourselves to lower vibratory, also when we align ourselves to higher vibratory qualities, okay, choices, sentiments, thoughts, actions in life, okay, we are giving our power to these frequency levels and the beings that live in there, and the beings that live in there. In other words, when we give our power to the levels that are higher than us, okay, we are strengthening the connection to these supernatural realms, okay, and basically feeding them, and in return they support us. There's a picture, in my head that looks like, these higher spiritual beings, yeah, that are, and I just want to call beings for now, that are receiving, the power from us by us aligning ourselves, to empathy, to forgiveness, to unconditionality, to, inspiration, they take notice of us in that way and support us. They pull us up. Whereas if we align ourselves in action, word, sentiment, or thought to the realms of pain and fear and anger and specialness, we are feeding. We're feeding, the entities, the beings that live there, by giving them our power. We're giving them our power, and they use our powers, okay, to elevate themselves. Yeah, they need to move up as well. They want to move up as well. So they function more like a parasite or like a vampire. So what they will do then is pull us down. And this is the part here that so many of us are afraid of imagining. But when see the spiritual reality of words, of choices, of deeds, of thoughts, yeah, of sentiments, you can clearly see this, and some of you already have an inkling of that. So this next level of accepting, the spiritual reality behind the material reality, yeah, is an important step that we all need to make in order for us to understand life and to understand the physical, yeah, the natural world, the supernatural and the subnatural world. We have to understand it so that, and this is then, going back to choice and, us being able to knowing and discerning what spirit we are feeding with what kind of choice. So by ignoring or rejecting the presence or the existence of, let's say, dark forces, we are basically fading out at least half of our choices here, the consequences of these choices. So by ignoring or rejecting the presence of a dark force, be it, that you associate that with the devil or with whatever you associate it with, is probably something like Janet, like you said, that you were programmed with at an early stage. Okay, but if you reject the presence of that, you'll never be able to discern it. And so for those of us here who want to actually learn how to discern truth, how to step into their freedom and how to know love, okay, this has to include that we accept the presence of darkness along with light. It is not enough to say light is light and darkness is the absence of light. That's not enough. That's not enough, because there's a spiritual reality behind that, and that spiritual reality is something that needs to be understood first. Okay, the beauty about this is, and actually Roger, without you probably being aware of this, made a case for this. Once you acknowledge the existence of darkness, and even go as far as acknowledge the existence of darkness in you, okay, once you learn darkness, not only do you have to reject it anymore because you've already admitted it to yourself, but once you know darkness in you, you become able to discern darkness in others and in the world. You become able to discern truth. So one of the pillars of Jesus' teachings, for example, was the presence of darkness and the importance, yeah, of knowing the difference. This is very, very important for us to understand. This is also where a New Age really sends people to the wrong exit. Now, does this mean that we have to focus on darkness? No, absolutely not. Okay, but we cannot reject or ignore darkness. Now, ignoring darkness does not protect us of the effects and the consequences of aligning or tethering ourselves to the beings that exist in the darkness. Yeah? So ignoring or rejecting darkness does not protect us of the effects and the consequences of making choices basically, that are aligned to these beings in the dark. So whether you believe it or not, okay, or how you visualize it, you know, is actually irrelevant. The main statement here is that you cannot discern truth if you reject half of the range, if you reject the existence of, that basically the below. And this is a great teaching of living a physical life. Yeah, the reason why we as these eternal infinite souls have to experience and learn to master physical life is that we learn about these forces that basically, drive the universe, okay, and have to experience it. We have to experience it to know them. And once we know them, we can choose. And once we can choose, we've developed our own I. Or the other way around, as we are developing our own I, yeah, the higher version, the higher expression of our ego, if you will, okay, we are asked to learn to discern light from dark, truth from untruth. It's the reason why I keep saying that the confrontation with untruth is an instrumental tool for our spiritual growth. The confrontation with unfreedom is an instrumental tool for our spiritual, for our soul growth. The confrontation with unlove is an instrumental tool for our spiritual growth. And that awareness changes everything.
Jona,
Yes.
isn't the biggest part of it, to me at least, is that the initial labeling of these two things immediately takes us out of believing and existing as spirit and a body. Right there at that point, to me, is you're already in a darkness, whether it's like white shadow darkness because you are a heavenly person and you do good for people and you're so perfect, or you're in your darkness because you're not in spirit and you're not in touch with what being able to discern right from wrong. So it seems like so much of it's such a programming that the initial thing, it actually just, even though it's talking about heaven and it does help, one feels, at least I do, if I think of the little angel on a cloud, I feel a lot better than if I start to contemplate any visions of anything darker. But still, it's a mental thing rather than a feeling thing, which if we're identifying ourselves as spirit, we're feeling it. And right there, it sort of fries out the the mental constructs from that point, and so then it's almost easier to see and discern. Oh, that feels right and right, and that feels improper and not a good idea. Yeah.
Well, I mean, clearly, I think it's established for us that we are under the influence of a lot of programming, okay, and that's external. All right, when we talk about the spiritual journey and the journey of our conscious I, okay, we're talking about an internal um, developmental process. Okay, so in the course of this developmental process, like, or let me back up one more level. Uh, if you didn't have a consciousness, you wouldn't even raise any of those kind of questions. Okay, so it is your consciousness that stands above your mind, okay, that can observe your mind. This is very important to establish, regardless of whether you see yourself as a soul with a body or a body with a soul. There's something in you, and that's an internal experience that everybody, at least here in this community, has, okay, that allows you to observe your body, your emotions, and your mind. And that is what we call consciousness. So that consciousness is not necessarily refined. It's pretty much empty. Yeah, you get the ego for free. The ego comes with a certain paradigm, and that is avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. Yeah, so that's your bottom line. That's what you're born with. Okay, an empty sheet. Okay, with just sort of one fundamental um, drive, and that is to avoid pain and to seek pleasure. That's more or less biological. Yeah, instinct and drive. All right, and as you're beginning to experience your own consciousness that is able to witness, your body, your emotion, and your mind, you're starting to get an inkling that there's a higher level in you. Okay, the fact that you can say these things, that you can talk about mental constructs and so forth, clearly shows that you're capable of tuning into your consciousness. Okay, and now you're referring back down to the mental constructs that have prevented you from um, witnessing or experiencing things from your consciousness. Yeah, that's correct. That is the experience of the ego. The experience of the ego is unfree. Okay, it's under the influence of all the physical drives, the instincts, and the stuff that the biology. It's under the influence of neurotransmitters, emotions, and pre-programmed sociological and instinctual behaviors. Okay, and it's under the influence of mental constructs. And mental constructs are produced. Okay, so nobody is born with mental constructs. They are being, produced in us at a very early stage. So pretty much first 3 years are like form sort of the deepest and core mental constructs that we operate on, mostly in our subconscious, because at the point our brain isn't even developed enough to have any kind of conceptual thinking. So a 3-year-old doesn't think like, if I do this, then this happens. This is not how it goes. Okay, it basically absorbs a mental construct like a sponge, stores it, and adds it to its core. Then in the time between 3 and 5, like experimentation takes place. It's like the ego years, where a child discovers, hey, if I lie, if I steal, if I take the cookie away from my best friend, I have more cookies, I have more pleasure, um, uh, just like that. That's where the ego unfolds, and then with the full capacity of the brain, the frontal cortex forming at the age of 5, we're then starting to come up with what we believe our own sort of mental constructs. These then get turned into beliefs right around the age of 14. Okay, so that's basically the hierarchy of your entire mental construction in you. Okay, there's beliefs, and there's unconscious and conscious beliefs. There's mental constructs, unconscious and conscious mental constructs, and they basically dominate your way of living. Okay, and choosing until you become aware that you have a consciousness, and that consciousness can supersede it. The consciousness stands above the mental constructs. You still have to work with those mental constructs because some of those are subconscious. Yeah, some of your unconscious beliefs, some of your unconscious, sort of, concepts that you have. Like, if you sin, then you go to hell. That's for most of us, like a subconscious thought process. Okay, and that's then when you begin to explore, what in me does that, what in me produces those beliefs, what in me, thinks those thoughts. Okay, that's when you discover your ego. So the moment you discover your ego, that's when you said hello to your consciousness, to your I. Okay, yeah, can everybody follow here? Yeah, at the moment you discover your ego is the moment your I is awakened. Okay, now that doesn't mean that that you're anywhere near to like overcoming your ego, but at least now you know that there is 2 levels in you. Okay, there's the lower you, which is the ego, and then there is the higher you, which isn't really refined yet, isn't really trained yet, but you can already experience it. And this is then what we call, awakening. Now you're starting to consciously work on making, better choices. Yeah, and that requires you to master your body. That requires you to master your emotions, and it requires to master your thinking. Because as we've already found out, and there's another workshop series that you can follow where I go into detail with that, 80% of the thoughts that you have aren't even your own. And out of these thoughts that you have, okay, 90% of all your thoughts are repetitive. So there's a force going on in you. I don't. That's not a being, yeah. That's just sort of the default, okay, yeah, that keeps you in that ego way of thinking, yeah, the pre-programmed way of thinking, until you consciously choose to not do this anymore. This has to be done consciously. This is work. You have to consciously train yourself to think your own thoughts. You have to consciously train yourself to feel your own feelings. And you have to consciously train yourself, to tune via tuning into your body and working with your body, that you can actually be in harmony with yourself. And once you're starting to get the hang of that, okay, that's when you're ready to let go of all the programming. The programming is there. We all have it, okay? Everybody has to deal with, these mental constructs that we grew up with, okay? But that's just sort of the part of the this evolutionary process that I keep talking about here, all right? The moment you recognize that you have an ego is the moment you have awakened to your I, and now you got to do something with it.
Yeah, but it's very funny when you say that, because I'm remembering. It's not like I'm not arguing with you, but
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because I think we kind of, as people, I have a feeling I'm not the only one to think that when you hear about it, the awakening or whatever it is, connecting with spirit or ascending or whatever, enlightenment, it's like somebody hands you a certificate, like you just graduated. Okay, here you go. You've graduated to second grade now, and that you even know exactly that it's what it's happening. It's like a whole other process, that it's not like you got a book in school to say, oh, okay, now at this point it's going to feel like this, and then you're going to get scared about all your darkness, and you don't even know where it's all coming from, but don't worry about it because you're connecting to your spirit a little bit deeper. So because I'm thinking, like, because you're talking about, like, don't deny, you can't deny that the darkness isn't there, which is absolutely true. However, once the actual experience of that starts happening, and it starts to, and at least I did, when things started to bounce off other people to me, and it's like going, what is going on?
Yeah, it's a whole new world.
What
Yeah,
is this?
yeah. So
It's not me. And it was scary at that point. It was kind of like, it's not me. It's not me.
yeah, so you just described parts of the journey here. So I don't know. If you're referring to, like, just sort of the general, like, sort of new age idea of ascension, because that's not what I teach. Okay, so in these past 15 hours of workshop, where we went into depth of that soul journey, I hoped that I was able to clarify that, that spiritual awakening is, in fact, actually a very arduous and quite conscious process that one has to choose to go. It doesn't come to you. You're not graduating by
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
handing you a certificate. So you have to work for it. That's why I keep saying you get the ego for free. That one, you get at birth. Okay, you don't have to do anything for your ego. Okay, but the I, that's hard work. Okay, but there is, sort of a natural evolution with this, and this is something that we need to learn to accept, is that once you awaken to your I, then there's no stopping it. Okay, because now you've tuned into the higher hierarchy within yourself. Okay, and you start seeing it all. Like you said, you start seeing darkness, you start seeing, like this or that, and even your own stuff. Okay, and now you can't really deny that. If you try to deny that, and that's what New Age typically does, which is why there's so many unrealistic expectations about that. And even like striving for a spiritual ascension is not even something that I would recommend. Okay, yeah. So this whole idea that you're like graduating, I use this word sometimes, but I'm talking about it in context with several lifetimes, okay, or hundreds of lifetimes even. And in the context of the development of the human soul, like the whole of humanity, everybody will eventually, okay, evolve in their soul development. Okay, that is the way things work in the universe. Do you know what I mean? So this idea that you're a better person if you sort of spiritually ascend, and we're going to clarify this here in a moment, because I wanted to do a review on something that I described in part 5, with visuals that I've made in the meantime, infographics that I've made for you. And now it becomes a little more clear what ascension actually is, because, the resurrection body or the ascension body was the subject of part 5. And there I explained it very clearly that this is not something that just happens to you. This is something that you have to work for. You have to work for it. You got to want it. But in order to want something, and this is also something that we really got to drive home with us, you got to be able to choose. In order to want something, you got to be able to choose. And in order to be able to choose, you got to have a will. And in order to have a will, you got to have the power to make a choice. The case that I'm making here is that 95% of people don't even have that power to make a choice. Because the next level that we need to basically master here is the ability to discern truth. So until we can discern truth, we cannot will anything. We don't have the power energetically. Because everything that we think, that we do, that we say, that we, sort of carry in us as a sentiment is basically pulling us down. This doesn't mean that we're sinful. There's no judgment in that. It's just due to the quality of the energetic resonance in us that we are feeding with it. So we got to understand, and this is also something that I covered several times, that our way of thinking, our way of emoting, our way of expressing, our way of acting has consequences, because it either feeds our power, it either empowers us, or it takes it away by feeding other beings. There's no good or bad with this. That just is. Okay, so we can sit there and complain and say, oh yeah, my life is so hard, and all the people around me are so mean, and and I'm so powerless, and yes, and it feels terrible, and they're all out to get me. Okay. Or I can say, something's going wrong here. Okay, no matter what I try, okay, it keeps on, getting harder, or it keeps on pulling me further down. I got to change something. Okay, sure, I can go into the other extreme and say, oh, I'm just going to only think positive thoughts, and I'm just going to completely reject any kind of negative thought. That's what New Age suggests. Okay, just ignore, anger, just ignore fear, just ignore all that. okay, or worse, because New Age actually judges it, says it's very unspiritual, to feel anger or to feel fear. Okay, so that's bad. So don't do that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to make you guys understand is that you do have the choice. All right, and these emotions, these energetic qualities that come with either of the resonances on that whole scale, okay, they create an energetic reality. So we just got to acknowledge that. Okay, so if I feed fear thoughts, yeah, by ruminating about what could happen and what might happen and so forth, I got to be aware that what that does to me. That's what I mean with consequence. I'm not talking about judgment day. I'm talking about how it influences our energetic reality and with it what we manifest. It's actually a very empowering message that I'm sending here, and that is, guys, wake up. You can determine your reality. You just got to become more aware of it and gradually work yourself out of the unfreedom that you have in your life due to these unconscious beliefs and so forth that you need to tackle. You need to tackle them one by one. Complaining about them isn't going to change them. It's actually feeding them. Every time we complain about the programming and what happens to us as a child and we're feeding them. So the whole point of spiritual awakening is not a graduation or anything of that sort. That's just like when you move from toddlerhood into like school age, or from school age into puberty. There's no judgment, when you start puberty. This isn't like better than uh, uh, you know being 14-year-old is not better than being 6-year-old. It's just a different developmental stage. So when you awaken to your I, when you awaken to your consciousness, well, then you are in a new developmental stage. And that means things are changing. By the way, has anybody seen Inside Out 2? That just came into the movies. In the Inside Out series, the Pixar movie series 1 and 2, they're pretty good. They're pretty good as far as like, how emotions are being processed. And the part 2 shows what happens when a child moves from, big kid into puberty. Everything changes. You see the world with different eyes, with new eyes. And so the paradigm in which you operate also has to change. And each time we level up, if you will, which happens as a natural consequence. There's a natural consequence of our evolutionary process, yeah, of the development of our consciousness. Every time you level up, okay, you're basically standing in front of a new world that shows you new challenges that you have to work with to navigate this new world. And it comes with dangers, of course, and it comes with pitfalls and so forth. So we make a lot of mistakes, yeah. So when we awaken to our spirituality, then all we want to do is like feel bliss and think positive thoughts. And then we do this for a while, and then we wonder why our life doesn't get better. Okay, so then we go into depression and victimhood, and oh yeah, and everything is so bad, and the world out there, nobody gets it, and nobody, they're all just ego. Everybody's ego out there, and I better hide myself, because it's too dangerous, because their ego could jump over to me. Okay, and then we isolate, and then, we go lower again, and then we realize, oh, actually, there's something in human connection that teaches me something that actually empowers me. So I need to go back out again, and I need to learn how to tackle that. Can you guys follow me? And those are natural processes. Those of you who have children can observe that in real time. Now, what happens when your children go through these different developmental stages? Now, one of these stages is, when they lose their baby teeth, between 6 and 7, that's when they turn into a big kid, okay? And then the next one is when they go into puberty, yeah, between 13 and 14. And then when they grow into adulthood, between 20 and 21. And then when they, grow out of their adolescence, when they become more mature adults, around 29, 30. Do you see what I'm saying? Like there's stages that everybody goes through, yeah, in the microcosm as in the macrocosm. That is how the universe works. And each time, yeah, we step into a new developmental stage, we have to work with the layers of, unconscious programming and, thought processes and emotions and so forth. I mean, you guys are mostly all mature grown-ups here, mature adults. Think back how you thought about love and relationships and jealousy and all these subjects that come up when you're like 15, 16, and compare it with how you feel about it today. Of course there's a development that has taken place. It's neither good nor bad. It is the natural consequence. So when I talk about consequences, I'm not talking about judgment. I'm talking about what that does to a person. Okay, so as we're going through our life, we're going through these different developmental stages. As humanity goes through, its developmental cycle, which spans over hundreds of thousands of years, okay, it goes into different stages of consciousness development, which basically sets sort of the outer condition. Okay, right now we are in a space where it's important for us to form and refine our consciousness soul. Okay, it's very, very important for us, to make that connection between our heart and our mind, to, like really, learn how to master our thinking and our feeling so that we can more consciously will. And that requires us to discern truth, that requires us to discern freedom, and most importantly, but this has to have truth and freedom as a prerequisite, to learn to discern love, to learn about love, what love is. So at the end of this developmental cycle that humanity is in, okay, we'll be able to discern these things. And then something happens where we step into the next evolutionary cycle. And last time when I talked about the process of etherization, I gave you a preview of what's going to happen in like 1,500 years from now. Okay, when people have, people as in like the whole of humanity have become able to discern these things. Okay, then, a further spiritualization takes place. So to go back to the workshop material here, I showed, that in the context with human consciousness development, which is part 2, that in the early stages, in the very, very early stages of humanity, we only existed in the astral. We didn't even have a physical form. And then we developed an etheric. Okay, so we were basically like all ghosts, if you will. Okay, and it isn't, until this developmental stage that we're fully materialized. Okay, this as in like, these last 10,000 years. Okay, and right now we are in a stage where we fully grow into our consciousness, and we're not very far with that yet. Okay, we're just awakening to our consciousness. Yeah, we're awakening to, like, oh, there's something, there's something outside of the material. Oh, we are actually a soul with a body and not a body with the soul. Okay. And that then has to connect again with the material, which is also what we are in the process of doing, and recognizing that these two realities, the energetic, the consciousness realm and the material realm, that they are connected, that they exist, that they coexist. Okay, that everything in the material is actually something that first existed in consciousness. So everything that materializes is nothing but an outer process of an inner conscious, consciousness. There's an there's a consciousness that has thought things up, okay, that brought it into the material. This is where we're at. Okay, and the next level of human evolution is the etherization. This is where we are now slowly developing ourselves back out of the material reality, because we don't no longer need it. We have already understood the connection between consciousness and material, and that you can actually manifest out of your consciousness. Okay, and then you can decouple from the material because you no longer need that experience. And then the further epoch, is where we, basically decouple even more so from the material, because the etheric is, basically the energetic template to the material. So it's tied to the material. Yeah, where we fully, turn into astral beings again. This is thousands upon thousands of years ahead of us. Yeah, these kind of developmental stages. But it's very important to understand the term etherization, because this is where we're headed. We are now here realizing the connection between the consciousness and the material. Yeah, frequencies, but and resonances and so forth. That whole sort of awareness that we're having here in the 21st century. Yeah, that is taking on more and more form. So, like even 20 years ago, this was more like woo. Now it's much more accepted, and for the next hundreds of years, we're gonna discover more and more, how this manifestation, this materialization process actually works. But that's not the end of it, because right there, all we can do now, is basically control matter with our consciousness, and then what? That's when we decouple from the material, because we no longer need that physical experience. We no longer need to physically experience our higher self. And some of us have already done some work, in previous lives. So we already see the etheric. Yeah, we already see all this. We already see this and don't know what it means yet, because our conscious, our overall conscious level of humanity isn't far enough developed yet. But we already have, the impulses to do that. That's how the divine basically works through us. Okay, it gives us these impulses and wants us to go into spiritual investigation and so forth. So that's why we're here, because we feel that. This is basically what, the soul's evolutionary path, yeah, the divine, the natural evolutionary path of the soul looks like. Okay, and that's called etherization at this point. Now, the main topic here of part 6 is actually to talk about inversions of the natural evolutionary path. Yeah, what we call devolution. Okay, and that, from an esoteric point of view or a chemical point of view, looks a little different. What I call electrification, because at this point in time on our planet, It's happening through electrification. We are trying to control this materialization, this manifestation process, not through our consciousness, but through matter, through the material, through technology. The technology is all matter, okay? And basically want to stop the divine evolution, okay, right there. We want to stay alive forever. We want to stay in the material forever. You need to let that sink in. Why am I calling it electrification? Simply because it happens through the electrification in our life. Okay? Electricity, as I explained in part 2, is the decayed form of light. Okay? So electricity is basically what light emits when it dies. Okay? So it's a force from the underworld. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with bringing electricity in our lives to bring more comfort and progress in certain areas and so forth, for as long as it doesn't dominate our lives. But when it begins to dominate our life, and when it begins to sort of form, and this is now the cosmological aspect, to form a grid around our houses and our cities, our countries, and our entire planet, which is what is happening right now. Okay, then basically, on this cosmological level, the planet Earth is now starting to form an electrical field around it, okay, that disconnects it from the divine evolutionary path. I don't know if you can imagine that, but really what we as humans, are doing right now with, throwing all those satellites into the atmosphere and, creating these massive electrical grids around the world, including going into the inner Earth, is an attempt to disconnect the entire planet, sort of the mothership of humanity, from the divine evolutionary soul path. And I don't need to tell you guys, how that expresses in your personal lives. This is obvious nowadays, things such as, phones, devices, Wi-Fi, and so forth, all the things that we are accumulating in our lives, that brings in electricity and electromagnetic waves, okay, is fundamentally adversarial to our soul's development into higher spiritual realms. It's basically trying to disconnect us from the higher spiritual realms. That's something we need to understand as the spiritual reality behind our technological developments. There are forces at work that bring in technology, and I don't mean this in a conspiratorial way, because this isn't about any particular company or industrial military complex or whatever. There's much larger forces that I'm talking about, okay, that are hindering, that make it harder for us, to feel this spiritual impulse, this impulse for spiritual inquiry. Now, is that bad news? Not really, but we got to understand what is actually happening. So the whole point of this workshop series was so that we can better understand, the spiritual reality behind all the things that are unfolding in our world. Okay, so whether it's war in Israel or in the Ukraine, or like future wars, or like things that are happening in financial markets, or they all have a spiritual reality behind them. And without understanding the spiritual reality, it's all unknown for us. It's all just things that happen to us. We don't understand. Yeah. what they're for, what the agenda is, and therefore we're afraid of them. So what you got to understand here is that when you awaken to your consciousness, you're going to have to not just inquire about yourself. That's obviously the first step, because you got to understand yourself better in your own journey. Okay, you got to have to start asking questions. Why is this and why is that? And what is the agenda? What is the force behind that? What is the spiritual reality behind that? Now, why does Elon Musk propagate life on Mars? Where does this come from? What kind of teaching is that? What kind of agenda is that? And once you start asking those kind of questions and investigate that, you'd be surprised what you find out. And I'm not, implying anything here. I'm just trying to show you that there's so much more that will begin to show itself to you once you awaken. And those are very scary things if you don't understand them. If you begin to investigate them and begin to understand them, you no longer need to be afraid of them. Why? Because you understand that there's certain cycles and certain things that have to happen in a way for the totality of human consciousness to evolve. Now we can investigate, the intricacies of that, like the question that Jared asked last time, is there soulless people, and all those kind of questions that I would encourage you to ask. Okay, but I will not give you answers, based on conspiracy theories. I'll give you answers based on the spiritual reality behind that. Which means when we're talking about technology and transhumanism and so forth, I'm not going to say, oh yes, of course that's bad. Of course it's bad. But it is something that we need to go through. We need to understand that you can't stop, this natural evolutionary cycle with matter. This isn't about eternal life in this body. We've learned this in part 5. This is about eternal life in the etheric and ultimately in the astral. We're not headed toward staying alive in this body forever. This is not desirable. This physical experience in this body that you're having right now is just a tiny, tiny fraction of the entire life cycle, if you will, of your soul's development. And what is it supposed to give you, or what are you supposed to learn from it? You're supposed to have a physical experience of your higher self and the forces, the dark and the light, okay, that operate on the material level, so that you can discern dark from light, so that you can make a conscious choice. You cannot make conscious choices if you cannot discern. And you cannot discern if you don't choose to live in truth, in freedom, and in love. You have to choose that. You have to want that. You have to ask for it, not like some outer force. You got to ask. This is the spiritual inquiry. You got to ask, okay, what is truth? How do I find truth? Oh, I have the ability to discern truth, but I need to develop that sense. Just like how we have the ability for speech, but we have to develop, our speech organs and our sense for speech. How do we do that? Through interaction with others, through interaction with the material. That is the purpose of life. And the spiritual purpose, this is this was just sort of the mutual purpose of, seen from an evolutionary standpoint. But the spiritual purpose of life is yet a higher one, and that is to learn to know love. Why love? Why love? I mean, I'm sure you've heard this a million times. Light and love will heal it all. Why? Why love? What's your take on that question? Why do we have to learn about love? What does love teach us?
Acceptance of ourselves and others,
Mm-hmm.
and unconditional love. It also
Unconditional.
teaches us,
Mm-hmm.
sorry,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Sorry, I'm
teaches us
just
to,
echoing. So,
and it teaches us what is dark from light. Otherwise, we'd just be running around chasing our tails all the time, and we wouldn't be creating anything new because we'd just be scared of the dark and what could happen to us instead of saying, well, hang on, that's not happening in this moment, so I can check in with how I'm feeling and thinking in relation to what I'm actually thinking and feeling, and if it's accurate or not.
so how does love help with that?
Well, I feel it's like a discerning tool. I can feel it rather than just project it, externalize it, or materialize it
Okay.
in that way. It's an internal process that I'm going through, that I'm actually allowed to choose, and not like a child that says, "Oh, I can't make mistakes," or this and that. No, I've learned from those mistakes. They've been painful, and different mistakes and challenges are really good for my growth. Somehow, even if I don't like it all the time, it still is
Mm.
practically good for my growth, no matter which way I'd like to meander out of it or into it. And what comes with that, I feel, is balance and more grounding as well. Even with all the stuff going on and all my stuff, I feel more grounded these days. Not all the
Yeah, it's
time.
empowering. It's empowering. It's a
Yeah.
very, very powerful force in us. Okay, and we're not talking about romantic love. I think
No,
that's
no, no, no,
understood
no.
at this
No, no,
level of,
no, no, no. No, no,
yeah.
no.
So it's empowering. It literally pulls us up, like the imagery that I created in you guys' heads earlier. Like it feeds something, in us. Okay, that connects us with something higher than us that pulls us higher. Okay, so love, I used to describe, I used to use the words, life embracing, life promoting. Okay, it is something that we can experience as, empowering in us. Yeah, it speaks to us through every cell in our body, literally. Okay, versus like fear or anger, okay, contracts. Okay, it doesn't expand us, it contracts us. Yeah, or like Roger described it earlier, it shuts down things in us. Yeah, it limits our range. It disconnects us. Love as a vibratory rate, okay, could be seen as the essence of life, if you will. Like a lot of times, in like in the energy training club, when we do the energy sessions and we experience this, in that sort of higher level of consciousness ourselves, we can feel how, love actually is something like a life wave. Okay, it's the essence of life. Now, so I could have easily said, we got to learn about life, but that's too broad. Okay, so when I'm referring to love, I'm referring to the vibratory frequency of life, of love. Sorry, yeah, that is life. promoting, life embracing. Yeah, that is expansive, that makes us want to grow. It's basically this divine impulse in us. Yeah, to strive for higher expression. That is what love is, and it comes with these things that you just said, Sean. You know, this learning of unconditionality comes with a lot of, ego pain. Yeah, it comes with a lot of letting go and a lot of this and a lot of this. All this stuff. Okay, that we've allowed in. Through the program thinking and feeling and so forth. And there's a lot of sort of growing out of these childlike understandings of love and truth and freedom, into the higher expression where we can actually discern it from within, where we can feel it. You just described it beautifully. It's an inner feeling. It's not a gut feeling, it's a feeling. It's an actual qualified feeling in you. So it's somebody who refines their spiritual organs and their thinking and their emoting and their body, okay, knows the difference.
Could we say that this is not going to be exactly good English, but not the state of neutrality, and that perpetuates in the growth of light, which we could say it's me growing, but it's actually just, isn't it a greater consciousness growing its light through, and we're part of it as spirit, and then the consciousness gets to witness itself growing more light.
Yeah. No, I mean, I understand every word you're saying, okay. I don't know if it's understandable for everyone here, but the point is that with every choice, and this is the consequences that I mentioned earlier, you're either aligning yourself to that sort of divine impulse that is in you anyway, okay, and you can feel that, okay, because it feels like Roger described it as a flow or something. It's not a feeling as in like an emotion. It is something that pulls you up. Yeah, that like it it, it it's almost like sort of nature's way of telling you you're on the right path. It becomes easy when you're in a contractive state, which is the lower vibratory. Yeah, the states that align you to the subnatural, the underworld, if you will. Okay, you experience a lot of struggle, a lot of contradiction, a lot of contraction in you. That said, it doesn't mean that you're not experiencing any challenges, when you align your life to, unconditionality. But you're right, neutrality is a key for that, because until you've mastered neutrality, which includes having an open mind, knowing who is thinking. Yeah, are you thinking or are you being thought by your mental constructs? Which includes you being able to freely feel without hesitation, without rejection, without avoidance. Neutrality means that you're completely tuned in to your senses, your feelings, and your thoughts. Because then you don't have to defend anything. You don't have to win. You don't have to compete. None of that. All that, you recognize that those are all ego notions. That's not, I mean, obviously we live in a world that is dominated by egoic thinking. Okay, so there are situations in life, in practical life, where you're going to have to make a choice, yeah, or compromise. Okay, but an alignment is something else. That is deeper. That is the core of you, your integrity, and your values and your priorities. It's the daily expressions, the daily sentiments that you carry. what you hold in mind. And when it's neutrality that you're holding in mind, that's when you're free. Because you can think your own thoughts, you can feel your own feelings, and you can feel your own senses, regardless of any outer influences. And that's when you begin to clearly feel the difference between something that pulls you lower, something that contracts you, something that creates conflicts in you, or something that connects you, that expands you, that unifies you, that harmonizes you. So these are the levels, here, the fourfold human body, that's what you consist of, okay, what you need to master, all right, in order to even reach that state of neutrality, yeah, where you, when you can call yourself a conscious being. Until then, you're not a conscious being. So here the promised visualizations of, how these different sheaths or planes of layers of yourself, how they interact in an untrained person. Okay, you see the ego here as the sense of self here as blue in the middle. Okay, and that's directly connected to the physical. Okay, and that's how the person perceives themselves. They perceive themselves from an ego level, and we know what the ego paradigm is: avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. Yeah, and it experiences physicality basically is bigger than itself. Okay, so life is just happening to the ego, all right, and there's no real um, sense to it. It makes no sense. Okay, yeah, you're just experiencing life coming at you, and ego just tries to cope with it. Now, there is a connection to the etheric, but that's aware to the untrained individual. Okay, so the etheric is actually the energetic reality, yeah, behind the physical reality. So this ego, okay, experiences none of this etheric reality. Yeah, the ego, an untrained individual is not aware how their thoughts, their sentiments, their emotions, or actions actually form an etheric reality that then in return forms their physical reality, what they're experiencing in 3D. There's no connection here. Right? That's the untrained individual, roughly 85% of the human population right now. Now, a trained individual, okay, and this is something, you would call a spiritually awakened person, okay, feels something, a spiritual impulse, and connects with something, that we would call consciousness. Okay, this is where their I begins to grow. Okay, yeah, so the higher expression of their self, develops and begins to feel impulses. Okay, impulses that are of spiritual nature. They're not fully aware of it. They can't really pinpoint it. They can't really, yet influence it, but they know that there's a connection there. Yeah, with everything that they put out into the universe, if you will. It's like New Age calls the astral the universe. Okay, that there is some kind of connection back into your physical reality, and there is. It is true. Okay, they might not fully be able to see the mechanics of it, like how that goes, what you send out into the universe, quote unquote, yeah, how that comes back to you through the etheric reality back into your physical reality. Some of you can see that. Okay, yeah, but there is now at least sort of a connection there. And mind you, this is a 2D representation of something that is extremely complex, and can be more seen as sort of fields within fields. Okay, so this is not obviously exactly how this looks like, but here my objective was to show the connection, the interaction and connection of these four different planes on which you exist simultaneously, and how they change as you spiritually develop. So in a trained individual, this connection becomes aware to the person. The person has an inkling of the I, okay, still struggles with the ego, but the connection can be felt. Okay. Now, in a spiritually initiated individual, so the spiritual initiation is a higher path. Okay, that's beyond the awakening. That's actually a methodical training, yeah, of etheric vision, and the connection to the astral, to the higher spiritual world. This needs to be trained. This is what we do in the energy training club and the grace training club. So the grace training club is more helps with connecting with the astral, and the energy training club is helps with the navigating the etheric worlds. Okay, what happens here now is that the I begins to permeate the etheric and the astral along with the physical. So now, the person begins to see how it's all connected, and how each and every choice creates an etheric reality that manifests in the physical, as well as an astral, sort of a spiritual reality, okay, that they are in charge of. This is extremely important. So, a spiritually initiated individual is basically someone with a spiritual driver's license, and I am. Okay, so the I am is basically is the embodiment of the I. It's when you know who you are. Okay, you understand, yourself as, an individuated soul self. Okay, that is having a physical experience, and you understand sort of some of the mechanics of that. In other words, you're aware of the consequences. You're aware of what happens when you align yourself to anger, fear, and doubt. Okay, and you still will at times, but you understand what that does. Okay, and therefore you lose all fear of that, and begin to be able to master that. So you'll have times where you get into fear, or get into doubt, or get into anger, and then you know what to counteract that, and what to align yourself to pull yourself back out, okay. So the spiritually trained person still aligns him or herself to the higher spiritual worlds, okay, like communicating with spirit guides and so forth, and guardian angel and so forth, to pull up. Whereas the spiritually initiated person with a fully individuated soul self, knows how to pull himself or herself out. Now, a spiritual master, and this is here, this transition is quite a big one. Okay, so there's very, very few spiritual masters that have walked the earth, okay, is able to influence the physical 3D through his etheric and astral. Okay, so this requires obviously, years and years, decades of training, and refining and purifying, your etheric and astral bodies. An ascended master, and that is then, and even fewer, like maybe, I don't know, 20, yeah, at least in the last 10,000 years of human history. Okay, um, for them it's actually no longer relevant to be in the physical. Okay, so they can master, any of those planes, yeah, and may decide to, like, consciously reincarnate into a new body. They do this in full consciousness. They do not lose the memory of this. Yeah, so they can master physical manifestations, physical manifestation of themselves. Okay. So I know that this is a lot to take in when you see this for the first time, and it's rarely ever done because it's very, very complex. You know, you can only really uh, do this kind of visualization if you have the insight into this is literally this, I made this up. Okay, this is how I see it. Okay, so an ascended master has consciously built his or her resurrection body, what we talked about in part 5. Yes, fully etherized. This would be sort of the future of humanity, yeah, in 1500 years to 2000 years. Yeah, this is where we're headed, and this is where we're at, and this is where many of you are at, some of you are here. Yeah. So this gives us, this spiritual journey a perspective by actually visualizing this and going into the inner imagery of that. And once you get sort of a feel for what is even meant with the natural divine evolution of your soul, yeah, sort of the life cycle, yeah, the natural life cycle of your soul, yeah, then you also understand the purpose better, yeah, to learn about deeper inner connection, greater levels of wellness, to develop less fear of the future or unknown, so making the conscious, that is the fundamental tool, yeah, how we overcome fear. Why do we have to overcome fear? Because fear is one of those most sort of captivating and imprisoning and trapping um, frequency levels for us, because we all are born with the awareness that we die. Okay, so the fear of death, yeah, and with it the fear of loss and so forth, is something that we all have to contend with, and therefore, at the core, basically, of our inner darkness. Then, a big part of this natural divine evolution of our soul is to make the connection with the bigger picture, to individuate as a soul, yeah, so to grow out of our sort of ego hive mind and develop our own I, all the way to like our own I am, yeah, and therefore develop strength and courage and grace, yeah, to overcome, these perils or these curveballs, that life throws at us, with grace, and then ultimately, to get to know love and what the essence of self, the essence of life actually is, and how to live it. Yeah, last time the question was, how does this help me in the practical life? Well, if you don't know what connection is, if you don't know what wellness is, if you don't know about the fear that is working upon you, yeah, and the darkness, the dark forces that work through you in this way, if you can't see the bigger picture, if you don't understand yourself as a soul, if you don't understand yourself as who you truly are, okay, then life doesn't make any sense. So these concepts here that we've talked about, with the subnatural, the natural, and the supernatural, basically heaven and hell, yeah, and the earth in between. Yeah, that's basically what that is. These concepts, they need to be understood to understand, some of these subnatural forces that are working through us, yeah, like the stuff that tempts us, that compels us, and so forth. When we form our own spiritual identity, we become a little less susceptible to them, but we gotta understand that, that there is a higher spiritual reality beyond what we can comprehend. And the knowledge that is collected basically here as spiritual wisdom of humanity, um, is already there. So it's nothing new. You're not discovering this. Yeah, all you're doing is you're waking up to it. So my tip for you, when you get to that place where you're starting to um, feel something there and you want to explore this a little more without fear, is that you actually start educating yourself. You start going back, read the Buddha's text, read the seven noble paths. Okay, read the Bible, read the book of the death, the Tibetan book of the death. Read these fundamental spiritual um, sort of works, okay, yeah, that humanity or human consciousness has already brought forward, okay, and feel into it. Don't just buy into it. You don't need to buy into anything that I say either. Just investigate it yourself and feel into it. Now, I did make an important point last time where I said, you have to look at everything as an evolutionary process, which means that if you look at historical literature here, if you look at Vedic texts, if you look at Babylonian texts, if you look at Buddhic texts, if you look at Greek and or Egyptian texts and so forth, you have to put into perspective the developmental stage that humanity was in at the time. And there is something that is different now, than there was before Christ, and that is something that affects all of humanity, not just Christians, and that is that with the arrival of Christ, okay, which is basically uh, a, a being, a higher spiritual being, yeah, that descended, that sacrificed, something of itself, okay, to incorporate into the earth for all humanity. Now, the Catholic Church says that died on the cross for your sins. Okay, I'm basically saying the same thing, just in a more neutral way, without the sin and without the guilt complex along with it. But this is how this works in spiritual reality. That's something. Whenever you want to like up something, something has to lower it. Something's got to give. Something, it's got to come from somewhere. And we've already talked about the esoteric concept of sacrifice. There's a very, very beautiful teaching behind sacrifice, because it also teaches, unconditionality and selflessness. But those are all very advanced teachings that, that require you to first have a sort of conception of love, to fully understand them without fear and without guilt. Yeah. Anyway, so going back and educating yourself, on some fundamental spiritual vocabulary, which is what I've tried to do here with these workshops and continue to do in the Sacred Self Healing community and the Energy Training Club and the Soul Self Initiation process. It helps you to overcome fear. Okay, it helps you to overcome the fear of the unknown, because you begin to understand, the bigger picture behind it. Okay, what these things are, what are angels, what are archangels, Elohim, light forces, what is the solar logos, okay, what is the Christ, okay, what is Christ consciousness, what are hell worlds, what does aligning and tethering yourself to a certain frequency do? What does it mean? What are the consequences of that? What are trapped entities? Okay, we haven't really talked about that, but that's basically the next step of understanding devolution. Yeah, these inversions of natural evolution. So for us to fully understand what devolution is, we first need to fully understand what the natural evolutionary path is that we talked about today. And the inversion of that is basically the backwards development of it. Yeah, so when an angel falls, yeah, fallen angel, or when an entity gets trapped, or when like a soul gets trapped, okay, really what happens is that it gets disconnected from its natural evolutionary path. Yeah, some of those things those entrapments, for example, can be temporary, like just for a couple thousand years. um, where a person's natural development or a soul's natural development gets halted, okay, and in some cases, they actually literally fall off the wagon and basically have to sit out this part of the evolutionary cycle and wait till it resets and starts all over again. We need to investigate things such as demonic forces, not as in like study them or anything. You don't want to go too deep into them, but you got to understand, what these forces are, these dark forces, and how they can work through you. Yeah, so the things that you've learned maybe in Sunday school or whatever is obviously a little childlike how that is being taught, okay, in most religions, but with the understanding that you have today, the boundaries of good and bad and all that, they start to disappear. So you begin to, with the forming neutrality in you, you begin to understand the purpose of dark forces as well. You understand that without, the temptation into this or that, without the confrontation with untruth, unfreedom, and unlove, human souls wouldn't really be very motivated, okay, to investigate these things. So, in the bigger scope of things, we need that tension, we need that duality here in the physical world, okay, to overcome it. It's a sort of a very logical step, that these adversarial forces, the struggle, the pain, Sean, you said it earlier, it's a pain that you learn through, that they are part of the natural evolutionary path. They're part of it. So, with neutrality, you begin to see that all these adversarial forces in your life and how they're working through you is part of your process. Now, you don't need to be afraid of them. You just need to be able to discern them. Yeah, you just got to know what you're feeding in you. You guys all know this popular, poster, with the wolf, the white wolf and the black wolf, the Native American saying that we all have, the white wolf and the black wolf in us, but depending on which one we're feeding, okay, that's the one that becomes stronger. That's the one that comes into expression. And that's exactly how that looks like from a spiritual, esoteric, or energetic point of view. Yeah, so depending on what it is, what forces in you that you are feeding, okay, that is what you're tethering, that is what you're aligning yourself to. And so if you go as far as, aligning yourself to forces that defy the natural or reject the natural evolutionary path, yeah, like satanic or black magic groups, or even the sort of the space alien and living on different planets and transhumanism movements, okay, you are tethering yourself to sort of anti-life entities, okay, they go anti the divine evolutionary soul path. They want to stop it. They want to stop it in the material. Okay, and that's what you need to know. So, in that, informing yourself about that and understanding, the spiritual reality behind these things actually helps you to overcome your fear. It's very easy, if you feel, love and light and the divine in your heart. It's very easy to say no to black magic or satanic rituals or transhumanism. Very easy. Don't need to be afraid of it. You just need to see it for what it is and say, oh, no, no, not interested. Okay, so that's really what this how this helps you to make choices in your practical life. It's extremely important tools for our practical life. Because this is where, and that's where we started our discussion here, in context of electrification and etherization, yeah, like 16 hours ago. Yeah, looking at the current developments in our societies and what they're indicative or predictive of, humanity is not in a very good place. It's not able to discern right now. And so spiritual awakening as a collective phenomenon, is basically a message of hope. Yeah, because without spiritual awakening, yeah, without people getting this sort of harsh wake up call, yeah, where they finally begin to see through their own delusions and their own egomania, okay, and learn it the hard way that they have to let go of these things in order to, live a more harmonious life, in peace and happiness and unity. Yeah, because right now we're not living in a world that is aligned to peace and happiness and unity. On the contrary, so people have to go through this heart awakening process. They have to live through the confrontation with untruth and unfreedom and unlove in order to become able to discern this. So here, just real quick, because it's already so late and I've already um, recorded a workshop about the eighth sphere. The eighth sphere, basically, I'm not going to go very deep into this. So there's a video when I talk about the nature of darkness, where I talk about the eighth sphere. It's a field around the earth, basically, that captures. It's not the same as hell, but it catches, those people that fall off that natural, or not the people, but the souls, and the entities that fall off the natural evolutionary cycle. So it's basically a repository of, fallen souls. And there's a lot that happens there. Okay, and there's also forces that, or entities that live in there, that are interested in strengthening that eighth sphere, which is also linked to the electrification of the planet Earth. So these things are not new. This is all stuff that you can read up in lots of different spiritual texts. Okay, this sort of uh, uh, rapture fear, okay, sphere around the earth, okay, basically between the earth and the moon, okay, where, these inverted souls, phantoms, and, basically the shadow selves of souls, where they live when they fall off the natural uh, uh, developmental path. Yeah, the natural developmental path. It doesn't mean that they all go to hell, but it's definitely that they're off their natural progression. Okay, and they can get stuck in there for quite a while. There's obviously, also dynamics that happen, over time within that. So the souls, the longer they stay there, the more they degrade, the more they, basically fall deeper, the more they get pulled deeper. So I just want you to have a little bit of a feel for what these terms all mean. 5D is a new age term. It's quite like sort of childlike, to think that, that every dimension, yeah, so 5D refers to the fifth dimension, okay, and it's based on, okay, you have the first dimension, which is a point, you have the second dimension, which is a line, you have the third dimension, that is you know, basically a geometrical, like a 3D object, okay, you have the fourth dimension, which is time, and you have the fifth dimension, that's basically the spiritual dimension. So it's a very simple way, of referring to like some kind of spiritual realm, but it's not very sophisticated. Um, so fifth dimension, what they really mean when they talk about 5D is the etherization. Yeah, they're really talking about the ascension body or slash resurrection body that we talked about in part 5. But it's very undifferentiated. Most people who talk about 5D can't even explain it. Okay. Um, Dark forces and light forces we've talked about quite a bit. The same with bifurcation. I've talked about bifurcation for nearly 20 years now. Bifurcation is a phenomenon that we're experiencing right now, in which humanity experiences the need for making a choice. Yeah, and that's part of uh, developing and refining our consciousness soul, because we actually have to make a choice. And that's quite a significant choice, yeah, because that choice expresses in our alignment, okay, whether we align ourselves to the light, life-giving force, or, to, these lower vibratory um, forces that want to, get stuck in the physical, that completely reject the existence of a spiritual reality. So that's something that we can actually see in our societies happening right now. Yeah. So you see, on one hand, an increasing amount of people that reject the existence of a spiritual reality, that reject their own origin and more or less purpose of life. Yeah, so anybody who wants to have eternal life really, says there is nothing beyond life, and the only reason why I'm here is, to dwell in the material. Yeah, and transhumanism, as well as, the space alien, other planets and so forth, the living on different planets, um, as well as the whole sort of satanic movement and so forth that you see, is all about the material life. It's all about, eternal life in this body. Yeah, even AI and so forth, because it's all about, preserving, maintaining what you have right now, which is fundamentally against spiritual or natural spiritual evolution. Because the natural spiritual, natural divine evolution wants it to expand, wants it to grow, wants it to evolve, yeah, into the higher spiritual hierarchies, and not stand still in the material and freeze, like sort of this material reality. Yeah, that would be like a prison, like an imprisonment. Yeah, so we had a point where we need to end this webinar and also the entire workshop series. I want to give you guys the opportunity to ask questions at this point. I can formulate questions based on, what most people want to know, and what questions that have been asked before. I think I have answered Jared's question. I guess the only aspect of the question, uh, uh, what happens when we, basically fall off the wagon, when, we align ourselves to the dark forces, and get pulled out of our natural evolutionary cycle. The last part of the question that Jared asked was, is there a way back? And I said yes and no. It's a complex question, because there always is a way, yeah, to redeem ourselves. There always is a way. Okay, so redemption is always an option. However, there's a level of rejection of spiritual reality. Okay, and this is something that you can, or maybe some of you, see as happening in our society right now, where, like say with black magic, and pedophilia, and using physical torture and death. especially of babies, as some kind of way to elevate your own development. Okay, that is very difficult to redeem in this cycle. Okay, so there are different levels of infraction that require different kinds of redemption, if you will. But generally, redemption is always possible. There's always a way back. This am I supposed to is something you need to scratch. Like if you can't, does you need to have a very disciplined consciousness there, because
Yeah.
you
Okay.
externalize it. In that moment, you've given up your power. Stop saying to
Mhm.
yourself, "Am I supposed to?" That's mystifying. That's externalizing things.
That's helpful. That's very helpful.
Just in
Thank you.
general, like for all of you guys, this am I supposed to, or what's my fate, what's my destiny? Stop thinking that way. Okay, as individuated soul self, as conscious I, you determine this. Okay, and you got to like literally grow into that power. There is nobody there, no paternal or maternal, or like whatever figure, okay, higher authority figure that you know tries to push you in a certain direction. The essence of free will is that you choose. What most people don't know is that they're choosing constantly, but in an unconscious way. They're not aware of what they're choosing. So this is literally the purpose of this workshop series, is to make you become more aware of what you're choosing. With every thought, with every sentiment, with every action, every word, every projection, if you will. Because all of that creates an energetic reality. And with it, your 3D experience. So it's not nothing you're doing wrong. It's a lack of discipline. Okay.
Thank you. It's very helpful. It's an old. It definitely is an old program that I'm
It's an
wrong.
old program. Yeah, it's an old
Yeah.
program.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for coming and immersing yourself into this kind of work, consciousness work, all there to assist you and inspire you to ask questions, not to doubt, to ask questions and to investigate. All right, so I'm wishing you a very conscious self, a way of thinking and emoting and willing. Okay, and I hope to see you soon. Our next workshop is going to be about the karma of love next week at a different time. It's a special that is aligned to the collective energies right now. So, what happens with all these relationships in our life when we die? What happens with the energy of that? What happens with what we have created? Yeah, in all our interactions with other humans in our afterlife, and is there something like uh, carry forward? Do we have to encounter these people again in the next life? Do we have to work through things like that? So questions like that, yeah, basically karmic relationships, yeah, the karma of love, um, will be investigated next week. I hope to see you guys out there. Thank you so much. Stay conscious.